In the cold vacuum of space, where empires rise and fall on the edge of a plasma blade, there exists a truth that every species in the galaxy has learned to fear: never threaten a human's family. The Galactic Council thought they understood humanity. They cataloged our aggression, measured our warfare capabilities, documented our stubborn refusal to submit. What they failed to comprehend was the one thing that separated us from every other predator species in the known universe: our capacity for love and the terrifying lengths we would go to protect those we hold dear. When the scream of a dying alien child echoed through the halls of the neutral station, every ambassador present expected the usual political maneuvering, the careful diplomatic dance that had maintained peace for 3 centuries. What they got instead was a lesson in why humans had clawed their way from a backwater planet to become the galaxy's most feared peacekeepers. The child wasn't even human, but that wouldn't matter. Because when a father falls and a child cries for help, humanity doesn't ask about species, politics, or the cost of intervention. We ask only one question: how can we help? And sometimes that question changes the fate of entire civilizations. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had seen many things during her 15 years serving on Nexus Station, the galaxy's premier neutral diplomatic hub floating in the void between 3 major sectors. She had witnessed the rise and fall of trade agreements, the delicate negotiations that prevented wars, and the careful balance of power that kept 1,000 different species from tearing each other apart. But nothing had prepared her for the sound that now echoed through the crystalline corridors of the diplomatic quarter. It was a scream, high-pitched and desperate, carrying the universal language of terror and loss that transcended species barriers. Elena dropped her data tablet, the quarterly trade reports forgotten as the sound cut through her professional composure like a knife through silk. Her years of diplomatic training, the careful emotional control that had made her one of Earth's most effective ambassadors, crumbled in an instant. The scream came again, and this time Elena could make out words in broken galactic standard. "Help! Please help! My father was poisoned. Someone help us!" Elena's legs moved before her mind caught up, carrying her down the gleaming corridors toward the source of the anguish. Her practical, diplomatic shoes clicked against the bioluminescent floor panels that pulsed in rhythm with the station's artificial heartbeat. She passed other ambassadors and their entourages, noting how they slowed their pace, how they whispered among themselves, how they calculated the political implications of involvement versus the safety of standing aside. The Zephyrian delegation, tall and ethereal with their translucent skin and compound eyes, huddled together like gossamer ghosts, their usual musical chatter reduced to nervous humming. The Krex representatives, massive insectoid beings whose carapaces gleamed under the station's full-spectrum lighting, clicked their mandibles in what Elena recognized as their version of concerned deliberation. Even the normally aggressive Vorthan military attaches, resplendent in their ceremonial war harnesses, seemed hesitant to investigate. Elena pushed past them all, her human urgency cutting through their alien caution like a ship through nebula. The scream had come from the Meridian Quarter, a section of the station designated for smaller, less influential species. As she rounded the final corner, she found the source of the commotion. A small figure huddled over a larger form, sprawled on the deck plates. The smaller being was clearly young, perhaps equivalent to a human child of 8 or 9 years, with golden fur that caught the light and ears that twitched with every sob. The species was unfamiliar to Elena, but the scene was heartbreakingly universal. A child in distress, calling for help for a fallen parent. The larger figure, presumably the father, lay motionless. His breathing was labored and shallow, and even from a distance Elena could see the telltale blue tinge around his muzzle that indicated oxygen deprivation. His golden fur, similar to the child's but streaked with silver, was matted with sweat, and his limbs twitched occasionally in what looked like involuntary spasms. "My father," the young one cried out in galactic standard, his accent thick but understandable. "Someone poisoned him. Please, someone must help. He's dying." Elena knelt beside them without hesitation, her diplomatic immunity and neutral status forgotten in the face of immediate need. "I'm here," she said softly, her voice carrying the tone she had once used with her own children, now grown and serving on distant colonies. "What's your name, little one?" The child looked up at her with large, dark eyes that seemed almost human in their expression of desperate hope. "Kieran," He whispered, "My name is Kieran. This is my father, Thane. We are Lycanians from the Outer Reach. We came here for the trade summit, but someone put poison in his food." Elena's mind raced through the diplomatic protocols, the proper channels, the forms that needed to be filed. Then, she looked at the child's tear-streaked face and mentally consigned every regulation to the void. "Kieran, I need you to be very brave, okay? I'm going to help your father, but I need to call for medical assistance. Can you tell me what happened?" The boy's ears flattened against his skull, a gesture Elena instinctively recognized as fear despite never having encountered a species before. "We were eating in a common area. Father was talking to the Zilithian merchant about crystal shipments. The food was good, but then Father started coughing. He said his throat burned, and then he fell down and couldn't breathe properly." Elena activated her personal communicator, bypassing the normal diplomatic channels and going straight to the station's emergency medical center. Medical emergency in Meridian Quarter, Section 7. Possible poisoning victim, species unknown. Request immediate assistance. The response came back almost instantly, professional and cold. "This is Medical Central. Please identify the victim's species for proper treatment protocols. Do you have authorization to request emergency services for non-Earth citizens?" Elena felt a familiar fire kindle in her chest, the same protective instinct that had driven her species to tame a hostile world and then reach for the stars. "This is Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth. I don't care about protocols right now. A child is watching his father die. Send a medical team immediately, or I'll have the Earth Embassy lodge a formal complaint about the medical center's response time." There was a pause, and then a different voice came through the communicator, younger and more concerned. "Medical team dispatched, Ambassador. ETA 2 minutes. Please monitor the victim's breathing and be prepared to provide basic life support if necessary." Elena looked down at Thane, noting the way his chest rose and fell in irregular patterns. She had basic first aid training, standard for all diplomatic personnel, but treating alien physiology was far beyond her expertise. Still, she placed a gentle hand on the Lycanian's chest, feeling the rapid, fluttering heartbeat beneath the fur. "Kieran, I need you to help me," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the growing crowd of onlookers. "Can you tell me if your father has any allergies or medical conditions? Anything that might affect how the doctors treat him?" The boy shook his head vigorously. "Father is strong. He's never been sick, but the Zilithian, he gave Father a special spice for the food. Said it was a delicacy from his homeworld. Father wanted to be polite, so he used it." Kieran's voice broke. "I should have stopped him. I should have known." Elena's blood chilled. Poison delivered through exotic spices was an old assassin's trick, one that allowed for plausible deniability and difficult detection. The fact that it had been offered by a Zilithian merchant made her even more suspicious. The Zilithians were known for their crystal trade, but they were also rumored to have connections with less savory elements of galactic society. "You did nothing wrong, Kieran," she said firmly. "This is not your fault. Adults are supposed to protect children, not the other way around." The medical team arrived with characteristic efficiency, their universal treatment pod floating silently beside them. The lead medic, a tall humanoid with blue-gray skin and multiple arms, immediately began scanning Thane with handheld instruments. Elena recognized the species as Altarian, renowned throughout the galaxy for their medical expertise. "Lycanian physiology," the medic noted, speaking into his recorder. "Male, approximately 45 standard years. Presenting symptoms consistent with neurotoxin exposure. Respiratory distress, cardiovascular irregularity, muscular spasms. Beginning treatment protocol." Elena watched as the medical team worked with practiced precision, injecting Thane with various compounds and monitoring his vital signs on portable displays. The lead medic looked up at her after several minutes of intense activity. "Ambassador, the patient has been exposed to Ziridian bloom extract, a highly potent neurotoxin derived from crystalline formations. It's typically used in industrial applications, but in concentrated form, it's deadly to most carbon-based life forms. We've managed to stabilize him temporarily, but he needs intensive treatment in our medical bay. The next few hours will be critical." Elena nodded, then looked down at Kieran, who was still clinging to his father's hand. "Can I accompany them to the medical bay? The child shouldn't be alone." The medic's 4 eyes regarded her with something that might have been respect. "That's unusual, Ambassador. Most diplomatic personnel prefer to maintain distance from interspecies medical emergencies. It can complicate political relationships. Sometimes politics need to be complicated, Elena replied, helping Kieran to his feet as the medical team loaded Thane onto their treatment platform. Besides, someone just tried to murder this boy's father during a diplomatic summit. That makes this my concern. As they made their way through the corridors toward the medical bay, Elena couldn't help but notice how the other ambassadors and their staff watched them pass. Some showed expressions she recognized as sympathy or concern, but others displayed the cold calculation she had come to associate with long-term galactic politics. The Zalithian delegation was nowhere to be seen. In the medical bay, Elena sat with Kieran in the observation area, while the Altaria medical team worked on his father. The boy had stopped crying, but his ears remained flattened against his skull, and he kept looking between the treatment room and Elena as if he couldn't quite believe that a stranger would stay with him. "Why are you helping us?" he asked finally, his voice small and uncertain. "We're nobody important. Our world isn't even part of the major trade routes. We have nothing to offer Earth." Elena felt something twist in her chest at the question. It was so fundamentally alien to her way of thinking, yet she knew that for many species, help only came with a price attached. "Kieran, where I come from, we have a saying. It goes something like this. We help because we can, not because we gain something from it. Your father is fighting for his life, and you're scared. That's all I need to know." The boy's ears perked up slightly, and for the first time since she had found them, something like hope flickered in his dark eyes. "Is that really how humans think?" Elena smiled, remembering her own children and the countless times she had bandaged their scrapes, dried their tears, and stood between them and the things that frightened them. "It's how parents think, Kieran. And, right now, while your father can't take care of you, I'm going to make sure you're safe. That's a promise." Through the observation window, they could see the medical team intensifying their efforts. Thane's vital signs had stabilized somewhat, but Elena could tell from the medic's body language that they were far from optimistic. The lead medic emerged after what felt like hours, his expression carefully neutral. "The patient is stable for now," he reported, "but the toxin has caused significant neurological damage. Even if he survives, there may be permanent effects. We're doing everything we can, but Ziridian bloom is notoriously difficult to treat once it reaches the central nervous system." Elena felt Kieran tense beside her. "What kind of permanent effects?" she asked, dreading the answer. "Memory loss, motor function impairment, possibly cognitive damage. It's too early to tell the full extent, but, Ambassador, you should prepare the child for the possibility that his father may not be the same person when he wakes up." "If he wakes up." Elena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Somewhere on this station, someone had deliberately poisoned an innocent being, potentially destroying not just a life, but the relationship between a father and son. The diplomatic part of her mind noted that this could destabilize trade relationships and create political tensions. The human part of her mind simply wanted to find whoever was responsible and make them pay. "Doctor, I need to ask you something," she said quietly. "Is there any way to trace where the Ziridian bloom came from? It's not exactly a common substance." The medic's expression grew thoughtful. "Ziridian bloom crystals are heavily regulated. They can only be legally obtained through licensed dealers, and all transactions are supposed to be logged with the Galactic Trade Authority. But," he paused, looking around the medical bay as if checking for eavesdroppers. "There have been rumors of a black market in rare crystals operating out of some of the neutral stations. If someone wanted to acquire Ziridian bloom for illegal purposes, they would need connections to very dangerous people." Elena absorbed this information, filing it away for later investigation. Right now, her priority was making sure Kieran felt safe and his father received the best possible care. But once the immediate crisis was resolved, she intended to find out exactly who was behind this attempted murder and why. "Can I see him?" Kieran asked, his voice barely audible. "Can I see my father?" The medic looked uncertain. "The treatment chamber is sterile, and his condition is still critical." "Please," Elena interjected. "The boy needs to see that his father is being cared for. Just for a moment." After a brief hesitation, the medic nodded. "Very well, but only for a few minutes, and you must stay behind the barrier." They entered the treatment room, where Thane lay surrounded by medical equipment. His breathing was steadier now, assisted by a ventilation unit, and his color had improved slightly. Kieran pressed against the transparent barrier, his small hands flat against the surface. "Father," he whispered, "I'm here. The human lady is helping us. Her name is Elena, and she promised to keep us safe. Please get better. Please come back to me." Elena felt tears threatening to spill over as she watched the boy's quiet vigil. In that moment, species and politics and diplomatic protocols meant nothing. There was only a child who loved his father and a father fighting to return to him. As they returned to the observation area, Elena's communicator chimed with an incoming message. The display showed it was from the station's security chief, requesting her immediate presence for questioning about the incident. Elena looked down at Kieran, who was curled up in one of the waiting area chairs, exhaustion finally overtaking his adrenaline. "I have to go speak with station security," she told the medical staff. "But I'm not leaving Kieran alone. Is there somewhere he can rest safely?" One of the nurses, a kindly-looking being with scales and gentle eyes, stepped forward. "We have family quarters adjacent to the medical bay. He can stay there, and we'll monitor him. If his father's condition changes, we'll wake him immediately." Elena nodded gratefully, then knelt beside Kieran's chair. "I have to go take care of some things, but I'll be back. The doctors are going to give you a place to rest, and they'll call me if anything changes with your father, okay?" Kieran nodded sleepily, then looked up at her with those two wise eyes. "You'll really come back? You won't just leave like the others?" Elena's heart broke a little more. "Kieran, I give you my word as a human being and as someone who cares about you and your father. I will come back, and I'm going to make sure that whoever did this to your family faces justice." As she made her way toward the security office, Elena's mind was already working through the implications of what had happened. Someone had attempted to murder a Lycanian trader during a diplomatic summit, using a rare and highly regulated toxin. The attack had been sophisticated and deliberate, suggesting either significant resources or dangerous connections. But what struck her most was how quickly the other ambassadors and diplomats had distanced themselves from the situation. Their reluctance to get involved spoke to something deeper than mere political caution. It suggested that attacks like this might not be as rare as she had assumed. Elena paused at a viewing port, looking out at the stars scattered like diamonds against the cosmic dark. Humanity had fought its way to the stars through determination, ingenuity, and an absolute refusal to abandon those who needed help. They had earned their place among the galactic powers not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through their willingness to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. Someone had made a grave mistake today. They had assumed that the galaxy's rules of political detachment and calculated non-involvement applied to humans. They had expected Elena to file a report, express diplomatic concern, and move on to other matters while a child watched his father die. They were about to learn that they had seriously underestimated what humans were capable of when someone threatened those under their protection. Elena Vasquez was no longer just an ambassador conducting routine diplomatic business. She was a human being who had made a promise to a frightened child, and she intended to keep it. The security office was located in the station's central hub, a sterile environment of brushed metal and holographic displays. Elena straightened her shoulders and prepared to begin the most important investigation of her diplomatic career. Someone on the station had nearly committed murder, and she was going to find out who and why, because a child had cried for help, and a human had answered. And that, Elena reflected as she approached the security chief's office, was about to change everything. Station Security Chief Mordak was a veteran of 40 years of peacekeeping across 17 different sectors, and his cybernetic implants whirred softly as he processed Elena's initial statement. The Kytherian's natural exoskeleton gleamed under the office's bright lighting, and his multiple eyes regarded her with the calculating gaze of someone who had seen every possible angle of criminal behavior. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said in his precise, clipped tone, "I understand your concern for the victims, but you must understand that this investigation requires delicate handling. The Lycanian delegation is small and relatively powerless. The Zilithian Merchant Consortium, however, represents significant economic interests across multiple sectors." Elena felt her diplomat's mask slip slightly. "Are you suggesting that we should consider the economic implications before pursuing justice for an attempted murder?" Mordak's primary eyes blinked slowly, while his secondary ones continued to monitor the security displays around his office. I'm suggesting that accusations without substantial proof could destabilize several existing trade agreements and potentially trigger economic sanctions. The Zalithian merchant in question, Vex Crystalline, has already provided his statement. He claims the spice was a gift of goodwill, a traditional gesture of respect among his people. And you believe him? I believe in evidence, Ambassador. And currently, we have very little of it. The spice container has been disposed of, the food has been consumed or recycled, and there were no direct witnesses to the actual poisoning. What we have is a sick Lycanian and the word of a traumatized child. Elena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the metal floor. Chief Mordak, with all due respect, someone just tried to commit murder on a neutral diplomatic station. If we don't investigate this thoroughly, what message does that send to every other small delegation here? That their lives are worth less than trade agreements. Mordak's secondary eyes, finally, focused on her, and she could see calculations running behind his gaze. Ambassador, in my experience, incidents like this are often the result of personal disputes or business disagreements gone wrong. Interspecies poisonings are rarely random acts of violence. You're saying Thane might have been targeted specifically? I'm saying that the Lycanians might have information they're not sharing. Perhaps this Thane had business dealings that went sour. Perhaps there are debts or obligations involved. Sometimes, Ambassador, the victims aren't as innocent as they appear. Elena felt a cold anger settling in her stomach. She recognized the tone, the subtle suggestion that the victims somehow deserved what happened to them. It was the same dismissive attitude she had encountered throughout her diplomatic career when dealing with smaller, less influential species. I'd like to examine the crime scene, she said firmly. The common dining area has been cleaned and returned to normal use. Standard protocol. Less than 6 hours after a poisoning, Mordak's mandibles clicked together in what Elena had learned was the Kytherian equivalent of an annoyed sigh. Ambassador, this station processes over 10,000 beings daily. We cannot shut down essential services for extended periods based on unconfirmed incidents. Elena leaned forward, placing her hands flat on Mordak's desk. Chief, I'm not asking as a diplomat requesting a favor. I'm informing you that Earth is taking a direct interest in this case. If necessary, I'll contact my government and request that human security specialists be brought in to assist with the investigation. The threat was not subtle, and both of them knew it. Earth security forces had a reputation for thoroughness that bordered on obsession, and their investigative methods often uncovered things that other species preferred to keep hidden. The last thing Mordak wanted was human investigators crawling through his station, questioning his procedures, and examining his security protocols. That won't be necessary, he said quickly. Of course, Earth has every right to ensure the safety of beings under their diplomatic protection. Good. I want access to all security recordings from the common dining area for the 12 hours preceding the incident. I want a complete chemical analysis of any remaining traces from the scene. And I want to speak with every being who was in that area when the poisoning occurred. Mordak's multiple eyes dilated slightly, a sign of stress that Elena had learned to recognize during her years dealing with Kytherians. Ambassador, some of the beings present during that time period represent sensitive political interests. The Vorthan military attaché, for instance, was conducting informal discussions about territorial boundaries. The Zephyrian cultural delegation was negotiating shrine construction rights. Questioning them about a poisoning could be interpreted as an attempt to gather intelligence on their private affairs. Then, we'll question them sensitively, Elena replied. But we will question them. A child is sitting in a medical bay, wondering if his father is going to die. Chief Mordak. I'm not going to let bureaucratic concerns override basic justice. The security chief's exoskeleton shifted slightly, plates adjusting in a way that suggested he was accessing his internal communication systems. Elena waited patiently, knowing that he was likely consulting with station administration about the political ramifications of her demands. After several minutes, Mordak's attention returned to her fully. Very well, Ambassador. You'll have access to the security recordings and the chemical analysis reports. However, I must insist that any questioning of other delegates be conducted through proper diplomatic channels. We cannot risk creating an interspecies incident over this matter. Elena nodded, though she privately reserved the right to interpret proper diplomatic channels rather broadly. I'll need a secure workspace where I can review the evidence. And I want regular updates on Thane's medical condition. Understood. I'll have my assistant set up a review station for you in conference room 7. The recordings should be available within the hour. As Elena left the security office, she couldn't shake the feeling that Mordak was more concerned about maintaining the status quo than finding the truth. His quick agreement to her demands felt too easy, as if he was confident that the evidence would support his preferred narrative of a personal dispute rather than a broader conspiracy. She made her way back to the medical bay, where she found Kieran curled up in the family quarters, staring out a small viewport at the stars beyond. The boy looked up when she entered, hope and fear warring in his expression. "How is your father?" she asked, settling into a chair beside him. "The doctors say his breathing is better, but he still won't wake up," Kieran replied in a small voice. "They said you want to talk to the security people. Are they going to find who hurt father?" Elena chose her words carefully. "I'm going to make sure they do everything possible to find the truth, Kieran. But I need to ask you some questions about what happened. Can you do that for me?" The boy nodded, his ears perking up slightly. "I want to help." "Good. Now, think carefully about when you and your father were eating. You said the Zalithian merchant gave your father a special spice. Did you see exactly how that happened?" Kieran's brow furrowed in concentration. "Father was talking to the Crystal Man about shipments from our world. We have mining operations in the Kareth Mountains, and Father thought we could trade our crystals for Zalithian processing equipment. The Crystal Man seemed very interested. And the spice. The Crystal Man said he wanted to show Father how much he valued the potential partnership. He pulled out this small container and said it contained rare spices from his homeworld, worth more than a month's crystal sales. Father was honored by the gift." Elena made mental notes. If Vex Crystalline had been genuinely interested in establishing trade relations, why would he poison a potential partner? Unless the partnership itself was somehow threatening to other interests. "Kieran, did you notice anyone else watching when the Zalithian gave your father the spice? Anyone who seemed particularly interested in your conversation?" The boy's ears twitched as he thought. There were lots of people eating, but now that you mention it, there was this Vorthin at a nearby table. He kept looking over at us, and when the Crystal Man gave Father the spice, the Vorthin got up and left really quickly. Elena's pulse quickened. The Vorthins were known for their military precision and their territorial nature. If they were involved in the Lycanian crystal trade, they might see new competitors as a threat. "Can you describe the Vorthin? What did he look like?" "Big, like all Vorthins. But his war harness was really fancy, with lots of rank markings. And he had this scar across his snout, like from a blade cut." Elena nodded, filing away the description. Vorthins took their rank markings seriously, so a highly decorated officer would be relatively easy to identify from the diplomatic records. "Kieran, this is very important. Did your father mention anything about crystal trading that might have upset other species? Any competition or disputes?" The boy's expression grew troubled. "Father said that the big crystal cartels didn't like small miners like us getting direct access to processing facilities. He said they wanted to keep us dependent on their middleman services. But Father believed that small miners deserved fair prices for their crystals." Elena felt pieces of a larger picture beginning to form in her mind. If Thane had been working to bypass the established crystal trading cartels, that could explain why someone wanted him eliminated. The question was whether the Zalithian merchant was part of the conspiracy or simply an unwitting tool. "You've been very helpful, Kieran," she said, reaching out to gently squeeze his shoulder. "I need to go look at some security recordings now, but I'll check on you and your father in a few hours." "Ambassador Elena," Kieran said as she stood to leave, "why do the big species always try to hurt the small ones? Why can't we all just trade fairly and help each other?" The question hit Elena harder than any diplomatic crisis she had ever faced. "I don't know, little one," she admitted. "But I promise you this. As long as there are humans in this galaxy, there will be people willing to stand up for the small ones. That's just who we are." Conference Room 7 turned out to be a sterile, windowless chamber equipped with state-of-the-art holographic display systems. Elena settled herself at the central console and began reviewing the security recordings from the common dining area. The station's surveillance system was impressively comprehensive, with multiple angles covering every table and conversation area. She started with recordings from 2 hours before the incident, watching as various beings came and went through the dining area. The footage confirmed Kieran's account. Thane and the boy had been seated at a corner table, engaged in what appeared to be casual conversation with the Zalithian merchant, Vex crystalline. Elena zoomed in on Vex, studying his body language and interactions. The Zilithian appeared relaxed and genuinely interested in the conversation, his crystalline features reflecting the dining area's ambient lighting. When he produced the spice container, his movements seemed natural and unforced. But then Elena spotted something that made her freeze the recording and enhance the image. In the background, partially obscured by a decorative pillar, was indeed a Vorthan officer matching Kieran's description. The being was clearly eavesdropping on a conversation between Thane and Vex, and his body language suggested intense interest rather than casual observation. Elena tracked the Vorthan's movements through multiple camera angles. He had been in the dining area for over an hour before Thane and Kieran arrived, positioned strategically where he could observe most of the room. When Vex produced the spice container, the Vorthan's posture shifted to high alert, and just as Kieran had described, the officer left immediately after the spice changed hands. But there was more. Elena discovered that the Vorthan had made several discreet communication gestures during his observation, subtle hand movements that she recognized as military tactical signals. He had been reporting to someone, providing real-time information about the conversation. Elena's communicator chimed with an incoming message from the medical bay. Her heart skipped as she opened it, fearing the worst news about Thane. Instead, she found an update from the lead medic, patient showing signs of neurological improvement. Toxin levels decreasing. Still critical, but more hopeful. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by renewed determination. Thane was fighting to survive, which meant she had more time to uncover the truth about what had happened to him. She returned to the security footage, this time focusing on the Zilithian merchant. If Vex was innocent, then someone had used him as an unwitting delivery mechanism. But how? The spice container had come from Vex's personal belongings, and he had presented it as a gift from his own homeworld. Elena examined the footage frame by frame, looking for any moment when someone else might have accessed Vex's belongings. It took nearly an hour of painstaking review, but finally, she found what she was looking for. 3 hours before the incident, while Vex was engaged in conversation with a group of traders, a service worker had approached his table. The being was dressed in standard station maintenance coveralls and appeared to be conducting routine cleaning. But Elena noticed that the worker spent an unusually long time near Vex's personal items, and there was a brief moment when their body blocked the camera's view of Vex's bag. Elena enhanced the image of the service worker, trying to get a clear view of their face. The being was heavily bundled in their work gear, making species identification difficult. But there was something about their movements, a precision and purpose that suggested military training rather than janitorial work. A chill ran down Elena's spine as she realized the implications. Someone had planted the poison spice in Vex's belongings, knowing that he would likely offer it as a gesture of goodwill during his meeting with Thane. The Zilithian had been used as an unwitting weapon, and Thane had been targeted specifically for his efforts to bypass the crystal trading cartels. Elena quickly copied all the relevant footage to a secure data storage device, then began reviewing the chemical analysis reports that Mordak had provided. The results confirmed that the spice had been contaminated with Ziridian bloom extract, but there was additional information that made her blood run cold. The toxin concentration was far higher than necessary to kill a being of Thane's size. According to the analysis, there was enough poison in that spice container to kill dozens of individuals. Someone hadn't just wanted Thane dead. They had wanted to ensure that anyone else who might sample the spice would also be eliminated. The implications were staggering. If Vex had shared the spice with multiple potential partners, or if it had somehow contaminated other food supplies, the death toll could have been massive. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a potential mass murder that had been disguised as a gesture of diplomatic goodwill. Elena's communicator chimed again, this time with a message from her aide at the Earth Embassy. Ambassador, urgent communication from Earth Central. Admiral Harrison requests immediate conference regarding Lycanian incident. Priority Alpha. Elena stared at the message, her mind racing. Priority Alpha communications were reserved for matters of galactic security importance. Somehow, word of Thane's poisoning had reached the highest levels of Earth's government, and they considered it significant enough to warrant Admiral-level attention. She gathered her evidence files and made her way to the Earth Embassy's Secure Communications Center. Whatever was happening here was bigger than a simple trade dispute or personal vendetta. Someone had tried to commit mass murder on a neutral diplomatic station, using methods sophisticated enough to suggest significant resources and planning. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that the galaxy's usual pattern of political detachment and diplomatic non-interference would protect them from serious investigation. They had counted on the incident being swept under the bureaucratic carpet, written off as an unfortunate accident or minor criminal matter. They hadn't counted on a human becoming personally involved. And as Elena prepared to report her findings to Earth's military leadership, she couldn't help but smile grimly at the thought of what was about to unfold. Because someone had tried to murder a child's father, and now the full weight of human determination was about to focus on finding them and bringing them to justice. The galaxy was about to learn why species throughout known space had learned to fear just 4 simple words. Earth is taking an interest. In the medical bay, Kieran sat beside his father's bed, holding Thane's hand and whispering encouragements in their native language. Neither of them knew that their personal tragedy was about to become the catalyst for a confrontation that would reshape the balance of power across multiple sectors. All they knew was that a human had promised to help them, and somehow that promise felt more solid and reliable than all the diplomatic treaties and trade agreements in the galaxy combined. Admiral Sarah Harrison's holographic image flickered to life in the Earth Embassy's secure communication chamber, her weathered face bearing the stern expression that had become legendary throughout human space. Elena had served under Harrison during the Titan crisis 15 years ago, and she knew that look meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Ambassador Vasquez, Harrison began without preamble, I'm going to tell you something that's classified at the highest levels. 2 weeks ago, we received intelligence reports about a systematic campaign targeting small-scale mineral operations throughout the Outer Reach. 7 mining families have disappeared under suspicious circumstances. 3 trading delegations never arrived at their designated stations. And now this. Elena felt her stomach drop. The Lycanians aren't isolated targets. They're part of a pattern. Exactly. What you've stumbled onto isn't a simple poisoning. It's evidence of an organized effort to eliminate competition in the crystal trade. The question is who's behind it and how far they're willing to go. Elena quickly briefed Harrison on her findings. The surveillance footage showing the planet evidence, the military precision timing of the Vorthan observer, and the massive amount of toxin that could have killed dozens if distributed differently. Harrison listened in silence, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When Elena finished, the Admiral leaned forward in her chair. Ambassador, I'm authorizing you to take whatever action you deem necessary to protect the Lycanian family and uncover this conspiracy. You'll have full Earth backing, including military support if required. Admiral, with respect, this is a neutral station. Bringing in Earth military forces could trigger a diplomatic crisis. Harrison's smile was cold and predatory. Elena, someone just attempted mass murder on a diplomatic station using methods that suggest cartel-level organization and funding. If that doesn't warrant our full attention, what does? Besides, she paused, consulting something off-screen, I have some interesting news about your Vorthan observer. Elena waited, knowing that Harrison's pauses usually preceded bombshell revelations. Colonel Crack's Bloodclaw, decorated veteran of the Vorthan territorial wars, currently assigned as military attaché to the Neutral Zone Trade Commission. His official mission is to ensure Vorthan interests are protected during trade negotiations. His unofficial mission, according to our intelligence sources, is to coordinate with various criminal organizations to maintain Vorthan control over certain mineral resources. Elena processed this information rapidly. So the Vorthans are using the neutral stations as a base for criminal operations? It gets worse. Colonel Cracks has known associations with the Syndicate of Crystal Cartels, a loose organization of traders and criminals who control approximately 60% of the galaxy's exotic mineral trade. They use intimidation, sabotage, and, when necessary, assassination to eliminate competition. Elena felt anger building in her chest like a physical force. They tried to commit mass murder to protect their profit margins. That's what we believe. But proving it is another matter entirely. The Syndicate operates through multiple layers of plausible deniability. Even if we can connect Cracks to the poisoning, he'll claim he was acting independently. The Vorthan government will disavow him, the Syndicate will deny involvement, and the whole thing gets written off as a rogue operation. Elena stood up and began pacing the small communication chamber. Not this time, Admiral. This time they made it personal by targeting a child's father. And they made it political by attempting mass murder on a neutral station. What resources can you provide? Harrison's expression shifted to something resembling approval. I'm dispatching the reconnaissance ship Phantom Dawn to your location. Commander Petrov and his team specialize in evidence gathering and discreet operations. They'll be posing as a routine Earth diplomatic support mission. ETA, 18 hours. What about immediate support? I'm authorizing you to recruit local assistance as needed. Our intelligence suggests that several other species have been targeted by the Syndicate, but we're too intimidated to speak up. This might be the catalyst they need to take action. Elena nodded, her mind already working through the possibilities. I'll need to move carefully. If word gets out that Earth is taking a direct interest, it could force the Syndicate to accelerate their timeline or eliminate witnesses. Agreed. Keep your investigation discreet until Petrov arrives. But, Elena, Harrison's voice took on a harder edge. If that child or his father face any additional threats, you have my authorization to take whatever protective measures necessary. Human citizens or not, they're under our protection now. The communication ended, leaving Elena alone in the chamber with her thoughts. She had been authorized to investigate a galaxy-spanning conspiracy, protect two vulnerable aliens, and potentially expose corruption that reached the highest levels of interspecies trade. Just another day in the diplomatic service. She made her way back to the medical bay, where she found unexpected visitors. Dr. Yissa, a reptilian medic from the Altarian staff, was deep in conversation with two other beings Elena didn't recognize. All three fell silent when she entered. Ambassador, Dr. Yissa said carefully, these are colleagues from other medical facilities. They wanted to discuss the unusual nature of the toxin used against the Lycanian patient. Elena studied the newcomers. One was a tall, ethereal Zephyrian with the intricate facial scarring that indicated advanced medical training. The other appeared to be from species she didn't recognize, with gray-green skin and multiple sensory organs around their head. I'm Dr. Windwhisper, the Zephyrian said in their musical voice. I serve at the medical facility on Transit Station Kepler 7. Dr. Yissa contacted me because we treated a similar case 3 weeks ago. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Similar how? The unknown species stepped forward. I am Healer Grex of the Meridian Medical Collective. We have seen 4 cases of Zeridian bloom poisoning in the past month, all involving small-scale mineral traders or their families. The concentration and delivery methods were identical to what was used against your Lycanian friend. Elena's mind raced. This was the pattern Admiral Harrison had mentioned, but the scope was even larger than Earth intelligence had suspected. Were any of your patients able to provide information about how they were poisoned? Dr. Windwhisper's melodic voice took on a somber tone. 2 of our patients died before they could be questioned. The third survived, but with severe memory damage. Only the 4th was able to tell us anything useful, and what they said was disturbing. Go on. The patient, a Ketheri crystal miner named Zeph, claimed that he had been approached by a Zalithian merchant offering partnership opportunities. The merchant gave him exotic spices as a goodwill gesture. When Zeph became ill, the merchant disappeared from the station without completing any trade registrations. Elena felt cold certainty settling in her stomach. The same pattern. Zalithian merchants being used as unwitting weapons delivery systems. Healer Grex nodded gravely. But there's more. Zeph described seeing Vorthan military personnel monitoring his meeting with the merchant. He also mentioned that other miners in his region had received similar offers from different Zalithian traders. Elena quickly filled them in on her investigation findings, watching their expressions shift from concern to outright alarm. Dr. Windwhisper's photosynthetic patches actually changed color, indicating extreme stress. This suggests a coordinated campaign targeting multiple stations simultaneously, Dr. Yissa observed. The logistics alone would require significant organization and funding. Elena nodded grimly. Which brings us to the question of what we do about it. These attacks are going to continue until someone stops them. And it seems like the normal channels of law enforcement are either unwilling or unable to act. The 3 medical professionals exchanged glances, and Elena recognized the moment of decision that occurs when individuals decide to step beyond their normal roles. Ambassador, Healer Grex said slowly, our professional oath requires us to protect patients and prevent harm. If we remain silent about what we've seen, more innocents will die. What are you proposing? Dr. Windwhisper's musical voice took on harmonics that suggested determination. Our medical networks span multiple systems. We can coordinate to identify other victims, track the pattern of attacks, and provide evidence that your investigation might not be able to gather through normal diplomatic channels. Elena felt a spark of hope. You'd be risking your careers, possibly your lives. The syndicate doesn't hesitate to eliminate threats. Dr. Yis's reptilian features shifted into what Elena had learned was an expression of resolve. Ambassador, we didn't become healers to hide behind bureaucracy when people are being murdered. If the established authorities won't act, then we'll support those who will. Elena made a decision that would have significant consequences for everyone involved. All right, but we do this carefully and professionally. I want complete documentation, secure communication protocols, and contingency plans if the syndicate discovers what we're doing. They spent the next hour establishing communication networks and evidence-sharing protocols. Elena was impressed by the medical professionals' organizational skills and their understanding of the political complexities involved. Clearly, the healing professions had dealt with cover-ups and corruption before. As the meeting concluded, Elena checked on Kieran, who was still maintaining his vigil beside his father's bed. Thane's condition had stabilized significantly, and the medical monitors showed encouraging signs of neurological recovery. "How are you holding up, little one?" she asked, settling into the chair beside Kieran. "Better," Kieran replied, his ears perked up for the first time since the incident. "Father moved his hand a little while ago, and the doctors say his brain activity is getting stronger." Elena smiled, feeling genuine relief. "That's wonderful news. Your father is a fighter." "Ambassador Elena," Kieran said, looking up at her with those expressive dark eyes, "the doctors told me that you're working to find the people who hurt Father. Are you going to make them pay for what they did?" Elena considered her response carefully. "I'm going to make sure they can't hurt anyone else, Kieran. Sometimes that means putting them in prison. Sometimes it means stopping their organization. But, yes, they will face consequences for their actions." "Good," Kieran said with a fierceness that surprised her. "Father always said that bullies only understand strength. Maybe it's time the big species learned that the small ones have friends who are willing to fight for them." Elena felt a mixture of pride and sadness at the boy's words. Children shouldn't have to think about justice and retribution, but Kieran had been forced to grow up quickly by circumstances beyond his control. Her communicator chimed with an urgent message from Chief Mordak. "Ambassador, please report to security immediately. We have developments in the poisoning case." Elena's suspicions were immediately aroused. Mordak hadn't seemed particularly motivated to investigate earlier, so his sudden urgency suggested either genuine breakthrough or political pressure from above. "I have to go speak with station security again," she told Kieran. "Stay here with your father, and if anyone you don't recognize tries to talk to you or asks you to come with them, you call for the doctors immediately." "Understand." Kieran nodded solemnly. "Be careful, Ambassador Elena. Father says that when people start getting desperate, they do dangerous things." Elena left the medical bay with Kieran's warning echoing in her mind. His father's wisdom was proving remarkably prescient. As she made her way through the station corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. The security office was more crowded than before, with several beings she didn't recognize clustered around Mordak's desk. Elena noticed immediately that one of them was wearing Vorthan military insignia. "Ah, Ambassador Vasquez," Mordak said as she entered, his tone falsely jovial. "Please meet Colonel Crack's Bloodclaw. He's been investigating irregularities in crystal trading activities and believes he may have information relevant to your case." Elena found herself face-to-face with the Vorthan she had identified from the surveillance footage. Up close, Crax was even more imposing than the recordings had suggested. His scarred snout and cold eyes spoke of a being who had seen considerable violence and hadn't been troubled by it. "Ambassador," Crax said in a voice like grinding stone, "I understand you've been investigating the unfortunate incident involving the Lycanian trader. I wanted to personally assure you that the Vorthan military takes crimes against neutral station residents very seriously." Elena studied his face, looking for any tells that might reveal his true intentions. "How kind of you, Colonel. I wasn't aware that Vorthan military personnel involve themselves in civilian criminal investigations." Crax's scarred features shifted into what might have been a smile. When the crimes potentially involve threats to interspecies trade security, it becomes a military matter. The Lycanians' crystal mining operation has connections to several disputed territories. We want to ensure that his accident doesn't create diplomatic complications. Elena felt the trap closing around her. Krax was positioning himself to control the narrative, to turn Thane's poisoning into a matter of military security that would be classified and removed from civilian oversight. "I appreciate your concern, Colonel," she replied carefully, "but I believe this is primarily a criminal matter that should be handled through normal law enforcement channels." Of course, Krax agreed, his cold eyes never leaving her face. "However, I hope you'll understand if the Vorthan military takes an interest in ensuring that any investigation doesn't accidentally compromise ongoing security operations." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Elena was being warned to back off or face consequences. The question was whether she was prepared to escalate the situation by refusing to be intimidated. Elena made her choice. "Colonel Krax, I want to thank you for your offer of cooperation. In fact, I'd love to discuss your security concerns in more detail. Perhaps you'd join me for a more private conversation." Krax's eyes narrowed slightly, but he couldn't refuse without appearing suspicious. "Of course, Ambassador. I'm always happy to assist Earth diplomatic personnel." As they left the security office together, Elena activated a discreet recording device hidden in her diplomatic badge. Whatever Krax was planning to tell her, she wanted evidence of the conversation. Because one way or another, she was going to expose the conspiracy that had nearly killed Thane and threatened countless other innocents. Even if it meant going up against military officers and criminal cartels with connections across half the galaxy. The galaxy was about to learn that threatening someone under human protection was a very poor life choice. And Elena intended to make sure that lesson was taught thoroughly and memorably. Colonel Krax led Elena to a supposedly secure conference room in the station's diplomatic quarter, his movements carrying the predatory grace of a career military officer. Elena noted how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, cataloging exits and potential threats with automatic precision. "Ambassador," Krax began once the door sealed behind them, "I think there may be some misunderstandings about the incident involving the Lycanian traitors." Elena settled into her chair, keeping her expression neutral despite every instinct screaming danger. "I'm listening, Kenneth." Krax activated what appeared to be a privacy screen, filling the room with a low harmonic that would prevent electronic surveillance. Elena's blood chilled as she realized her recording device would be useless. "The truth is, Ambassador, that Thane and his son were not innocent victims. They were involved in smuggling operations that threatened regional stability. The poisoning was likely retaliation from competing criminal organizations." Elena kept her voice level. "That's a serious accusation, Colonel. Do you have evidence to support these claims? Evidence that is classified for security reasons, I'm afraid. But I can tell you that Lycanian crystal operations in the Kareth Mountains have been used to fund insurgent activities in 3 different systems. Thane was a key figure in these operations." Elena studied Krax's scarred features, looking for tells. If that's true, why wasn't he arrested through proper channels? Why resort to poison? Krax leaned forward, his cold eyes fixed on hers. "Because sometimes, Ambassador, legal channels are too slow to prevent wider conflicts. Sometimes direct action is necessary to protect the greater good." The admission sent chills down Elena's spine. Krax was essentially confessing to sanctioning assassination while hiding behind claims of military necessity. "Colonel, are you telling me that Vorthan military forces were involved in the poisoning?" "I'm telling you that the situation is more complex than it appears, and that Earth would be wise to avoid becoming entangled in matters that could compromise regional security. The Lycanian boy would be much safer if he were to return to his homeworld immediately." Elena felt a surge of protective fury that she struggled to keep hidden. "Are you threatening a child, Colonel?" Krax's expression didn't change, but his voice carried unmistakable menace. "I'm pointing out that neutral stations can be dangerous places for beings who lack proper protection. Accidents happen, especially to those who involve themselves in matters beyond their understanding." Elena made a decision that would alter the course of everything that followed. "Colonel Krax, I want to thank you for this conversation. You've been remarkably illuminating." She stood to leave, but Krax's hand shot out to grab her wrist with crushing force. "Ambassador, I hope you understand that some secrets are too dangerous to share. Diplomatic immunity only extends so far." Elena looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up to meet his cold stare. When she spoke, her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had faced down death and found it wanting. Colonel, you have exactly 3 seconds to release me before this becomes a formal diplomatic incident. 1. 2. Cracks released a wrist, but his expression promised future violence. Think carefully about your next moves, Ambassador. Not everyone who opposes certain interests survives the experience. Elena left the conference room with her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. Cracks had just confirmed everything she suspected about the conspiracy, and his threats had eliminated any lingering doubts about taking direct action. She made her way to a secure communication terminal and sent an encrypted message to Admiral Harrison. Immediate assistance required. Threats escalated to direct intimidation. Request emergency protocols. The response came back within minutes. Phantom Dawn arriving ahead of schedule. ETA, 4 hours. Maintain protective stance. Authorization granted for any necessary defensive measures. Elena felt a grim satisfaction. Cracks and his conspirators had just made the mistake of threatening a human diplomat and a child under her protection. They were about to discover why that was considered a fatal error in judgment throughout known space. She returned to the medical bay to find encouraging news. Thane was awake and alert, though still weak from the poisoning. His eyes tracked Elena as she entered, and she could see intelligence and concern in his gaze. "Father," Kieran exclaimed, practically bouncing with relief. "You're really awake. The doctor said you might have brain damage, but you look normal to me." Thane's voice was hoarse but clear. "I feel like I was trampled by a herd of Korak's beasts, but my mind seems to be working properly." He looked at Elena with obvious gratitude. "My son tells me that you saved our lives. I owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Elena sat down beside the bed. "Thane, I need to ask you some difficult questions about what happened, and then I need to tell you some things that might frighten you. Can you handle that?" Thane nodded grimly. "After what I've been through, I think I can handle difficult truths." Elena quickly explained about the surveillance footage, the pattern of attacks on other mining families, and the conversation she had just had with Colonel Cracks. She watched Thane's expression shift from confusion to understanding to cold fury. "The crystal cartels," he said finally. "I knew they were ruthless, but I didn't think they would resort to mass murder. Can you tell me exactly what you were discussing with the Zalithia merchant? What specifically might have threatened their operations?" Thane shifted in his bed, wincing slightly. Vex Crystalline claimed to represent a consortium of independent processors who wanted to deal directly with small mining operations. He offered processing rates that were 40% higher than the cartel rates, with no exclusivity requirements. Elena felt another piece click into place. If small miners could get better prices through independent processors, it would break the cartel's stranglehold on the market. Exactly. And he wasn't the only one. I've heard from other miners that similar offers have been made throughout the outer reach. We thought it was the beginning of real competition in crystal processing. Elena exchanged glances with Dr. Yissa, who had been listening to the conversation with growing concern. "Thane, I have to tell you something that's going to be hard to hear. Vex probably didn't know the spices were poisoned. Someone planted them in his belongings, knowing he would offer them as a goodwill gesture. He was used as an unwitting weapon." Thane's ears flattened against his skull in distress. "Then, the poor being probably thinks he accidentally poisoned me. The guilt must be terrible." Elena was struck once again by the fundamental decency of this family. Even after being poisoned, Thane's first concern was for the mental well-being of the being who had unknowingly delivered the toxin. "We're going to find Vex and explain what really happened," she promised. "But right now, I need to focus on keeping you and Kieran safe. The people responsible for this have made direct threats, and they're not going to stop with one attempt." Kieran moved closer to his father's bed. "What does that mean? Are they going to try to hurt us again?" Elena chose her words carefully. "I'm arranging for additional protection. Some friends of mine are coming to help, and we're going to make sure nothing happens to either of you." Thane studied her face with sharp intelligence. "Ambassador, you're talking about more than just diplomatic protection, aren't you? You're preparing for war." Elena met his gaze steadily. "Sometimes, Thane, the only way to stop bullies is to show them that their targets have friends who are willing and able to fight back. The cartels have been getting away with intimidation and murder because they assume no one would challenge them. That assumption is about to be proven very wrong." Her communicator chimed with an urgent message from Station Traffic Control. "Unknown vessel approaching from Vector 7. refusing standard identification protocols. Security alert level elevated. Elena smiled grimly. And that would be my friend arriving. She explained to Thane and Kieran that Earth was sending specialists to help with the investigation and their protection. What she didn't tell them was that Commander Petrov and his team were some of the most dangerous human beings in the galaxy, with authorization to use whatever means necessary to protect their charges. Dr. Yissa approached with a concerned expression. Ambassador, I've been in contact with my colleagues through our secure network. They're reporting unusual activity at several stations. Zalithian merchants are disappearing. Security personnel are being transferred or reassigned, and there are rumors of significant credits changing hands. Elena felt the larger picture coming into focus. The cartels are cleaning house. They're eliminating evidence and potential witnesses, which means, Thane said quietly, that anyone involved in this investigation is now a target. Elena nodded soberly, which is why we're going to end this quickly and decisively. The cartels think they can use intimidation and murder to maintain control. They're about to learn that threatening innocent families brings consequences they never imagined. Kieran looked up at her with those wise, dark eyes. Ambassador Elena, are you going to hurt the people who poisoned Father? Elena knelt down to Kieran's eye level. I'm going to make sure they can never hurt anyone else ever again. Sometimes that means prison, sometimes it means other consequences. But I promise you this, justice will be done. Her communicator buzzed with another message, this one in Earth military code. Phantom Dawn requesting docking clearance. Cargo manifest includes diplomatic supplies and educational materials. Elena almost smiled at the euphemisms. Diplomatic supplies probably meant enough weapons to level a small city, while educational materials likely referred to intelligence-gathering equipment that could hack into any system in known space. I need to go meet with the specialists, she told Thane and Kieran. Dr. Yissa will stay with you, and I'm posting additional security outside your room. Don't trust anyone you don't recognize, and if anything feels wrong, contact me immediately. As Elena made her way to the docking bays, she reflected on how quickly her peaceful diplomatic assignment had transformed into something resembling a military operation. But then, that was often how things went when humans encountered injustice. They had a regrettable tendency to take things personally. The docking bay was surprisingly quiet when Elena arrived, with only standard traffic control personnel visible. But she knew that appearances could be deceiving, especially when dealing with Earth Special Operations Forces. A lean, dark-haired man in civilian clothes approached her, moving with the controlled grace that marked him as military despite his mundane appearance. Ambassador Vasquez, I am Commander Petrov. We need to talk. Elena followed him to a supposedly empty cargo bay, where she discovered that diplomatic supplies included 3 other team members and enough advanced equipment to conduct surveillance on an entire planet. Admiral Harrison briefed me on the situation. Petrov began without preamble. We have authorization to use whatever means necessary to protect the Lycanian family and expose this conspiracy. The gloves, as they say, are officially off. Elena felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Commander, I need to be clear about something. This isn't just about protecting 2 innocent beings anymore. We're looking at a galaxy-spanning criminal organization with military connections and significant political influence. Taking them on could have serious repercussions. Petrov's expression was grim but determined. Ambassador, someone just tried to commit mass murder using biological weapons on a neutral diplomatic station. If we don't stop them here, this becomes the new normal for how business is conducted in the galaxy. That's not acceptable. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. They were about to engage in a conflict that could reshape interspecies relations across multiple sectors. But, in the end, it all came down to a simple truth. A child had cried for help, and humans had answered. The galaxy was about to learn that some things were more important than political convenience or economic stability. And justice, Elena reflected as she watched Petrov's team prepare their equipment, was definitely one of those things. All right, Commander, she said. Let's go save some lives and destroy some careers. It's going to be a busy day. Commander Petrov's team moved with the silent efficiency that Elena had come to associate with Earth's elite forces. Within 2 hours of their arrival, they had established a comprehensive surveillance network covering the entire station, identified 17 beings with connections to the crystal cartels, and traced the source of the Zeridian bloom to a black market dealer operating out of the Vorthen military quarter. Elena sat in the improvised command center, watching data streams that would have been impossible to gather through normal diplomatic channels. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. The crystal cartels had infiltrated neutral stations throughout 3 sectors, using a combination of bribery, intimidation, and strategic elimination to maintain their monopoly. "Ambassador," said Lieutenant Torres, Petrov's intelligence specialist, "we've identified the service worker who planted the poison in Vex Crystalline's belongings. She's a Kytherian named Zix, registered as a maintenance supervisor, but with no employment history prior to 6 months ago." Elena studied the surveillance footage on the main display. So, she was inserted specifically for this operation. It looks that way. And here's the interesting part. She received a substantial credit transfer from an account linked to Colonel Crax immediately after the poisoning incident. Elena felt cold satisfaction. Direct evidence linking Crax to the attack. That's enough to bring formal charges. Commander Petrov looked up from his tactical planning station. "There's more, Ambassador. We've intercepted communications indicating that the cartels are planning to eliminate all witnesses and evidence within the next 12 hours. They're going to stage a series of accidents that will kill everyone connected to the investigation." Elena's blood chilled, including the medical personnel who've been helping us. Dr. Yissa, Dr. Windwhisper, Healer Grex, and at least 6 other beings are on the elimination list. The cartels have decided that this investigation has gone too far. Elena stood up abruptly, her diplomatic training warring with human protective instincts. The training insisted on proper procedures and careful escalation. The instincts demanded immediate action to protect innocence. The instincts won. "Commander, I'm authorizing you to take whatever action is necessary to protect those beings. I don't care about diplomatic protocols anymore. These people trusted us, and we're not going to let them die for it." Petrov nodded grimly. "Already working on it. But, Ambassador, there's something else you need to know. The elimination orders didn't come from Colonel Crax. They came from someone much higher up the chain." Elena felt the investigation expanding beyond anything she had imagined. "How much higher?" "Admiral Thek Ironjaw, Supreme Commander of Vorthen Territorial Forces. This conspiracy goes all the way to the top of Vorthen Military Command." Elena sank back into her chair as the implications hit her. If Vorthen military leadership is directly involved, then this isn't just about crystal cartels. This is about using criminal organizations as a tool of imperial policy. Exactly. The Vorthens are using the cartels to control mineral resources throughout the Outer Reach, eliminating competition and maintaining economic dominance over smaller species. What happened to Thane and Kieran is just one small piece of a much larger campaign of economic warfare. Elena's communicator chimed with an urgent message from the medical bay. "Security breach in progress. Unknown intruders attempting to access patient quarters. Immediate assistance required." Elena and Petrov exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. The cartels had accelerated their timeline. "Torres, execute protective protocols for all medical personnel on our list," Petrov ordered. "Chun, activate the station-wide surveillance override. I want to know the location of every hostile operative on this station." Morgan, prep the defensive systems. This just became a combat situation. Elena activated her communicator as they rushed toward the medical bay. "All Earth Embassy personnel, this is Ambassador Vasquez. Code Red Security Alert. Implement lockdown protocols immediately." The corridors of Nexus Station had taken on an ominous quality, with fewer beings visible and an atmosphere of tension that seemed to permeate the artificial atmosphere. Elena noticed that many of the smaller species representatives had simply vanished, likely warned off by contacts within the station's power structure. They arrived at the medical bay to find a standoff in progress. 3 beings in maintenance coveralls were attempting to override the security locks on the patient quarters, while Dr. Yissa and 2 other medical staff members blocked their path with admirable courage but limited effectiveness. "Step away from the door," Elena commanded, her diplomatic authority backed by Petrov's team spreading out in tactical formation behind her. The lead intruder, who Elena recognized as the same Kytherian who had planted the poison, straightened up with obvious malicious intent. "Ambassador, this is a routine maintenance inspection. You have no authority to interfere. Elena smiled coldly. Maintenance personnel don't carry military-grade plasma weapons. And they definitely don't attempt to bypass medical-based security during patient treatment. She gestured to Petrov's scanner readings displayed on her handheld device. Would you like to explain why you're carrying enough firepower to level half this deck? The Kytherian's mandibles clicked in what Elena had learned was either confusion or desperation. You don't understand the forces you're dealing with, Ambassador. Walk away now, and you'll live to see tomorrow. Elena's response was interrupted by a new voice from behind the intruders. I think you're the one who doesn't understand the situation. Colonel Krax emerged from a side corridor, flanked by two Vorthan soldiers in full battle armor. Elena's heart sank as she realized the scope of the threat they were facing. Ambassador, Krax said with false courtesy, I try to warn you about the dangers of involving yourself in matters beyond your authority. Now you've forced us to take more direct action. Elena noticed that Petrov and his team had shifted positions almost imperceptibly, moving to create crossfire angles that would neutralize the Vorthan soldiers if combat began. She also noticed that Dr. Yissa had moved to shield the patient corridors with her own body. Colonel Krax, Elena said clearly, knowing that every word was being recorded by multiple sources, are you threatening Earth diplomatic personnel and neutral station medical staff? I'm protecting vital Vorthan interests against individuals who have chosen to interfere with legitimate security operations. Elena felt a moment of perfect clarity. This was the moment when everything would change, when the comfortable illusions of diplomatic immunity and neutral station sanctity would be shattered forever. Commander Petrov, she said quietly, I formally request Earth military protection against hostile action by foreign military forces. Petrov's response was immediate and professional. Protection authorized and granted, Ambassador.